They planned the company dinner in a group chat I wasn't even invited to, then joked about keeping the vibe right while walking past my desk. I stayed late to fix a report one of them messed up, while they clinked glasses and called themselves a family. My name is Jacob Rowe. I'm 34 years old, a senior systems analyst for a mid-sized logistics firm based in Columbus, Ohio. I've been with the company for just over 9 years. I know the cadence of tight deadlines and midnight server patches, the low hum of network equipment echoing off an empty floor, the way a cheap plastic chair molds to your spine after a 14-hour shift. What I didn't know was how it would feel to be erased, quietly, cleanly, from a celebration I helped earn. It started with a missing calendar invite. At first, I thought it was a glitch. I even refreshed my Outlook 3 times and checked my spam folder. Nothing. Then I walked past the break room and caught them laughing. Melissa from HR, Ray from sales, even Brian, the junior analyst I trained last fall. They were talking about the steakhouse downtown, about splitting rides and what time to meet. I stood there for a second, pretending to refill my coffee. No one looked at me. I went back to my desk and opened the report on our second quarter logistics errors. Errors I'd spent the last 2 weekends correcting. No one had asked me to, but I knew if I didn't clean it up, our department would get flagged. Again. Around 5:45, people started grabbing their coats. Someone made a joke about finally relaxing with the real team. I wasn't sure if it was meant to hurt, but it did. I sat back down. My phone buzzed. A DoorDash notification. I'd forgotten I ordered something earlier. Some noodles from a place near my apartment. The driver dropped it in the lobby. No one offered to grab it on their way out. So I sat in the glow of my dual monitors, alone in a darkening office, eating lukewarm noodles from a stained plastic bowl. I could still hear their laughter in the hallway as the elevator doors closed. I wondered for the first time in a long while what all the extra hours, skipped lunches, and missed birthdays had actually bought me. Then I opened the file again and started rewriting the executive summary for the third time, because I knew no one else would, not right, not on time, not like I would. I heard my own name come up in the middle of their joke, followed by silence and then laughter that didn't include me. That's how I knew it wasn't an accident. I was heading toward the break room, hoping to snag one of the last coffees before the machine went into its nightly cleaning cycle. I slowed down when I heard voices, Melissa's unmistakable high-pitched laugh, Ray talking too loud like he always does when he's trying to be funny. Then Bryant said something muffled and someone snorted. That's when I heard it, Jacob. And then the kind of awkward pause people make when they realize the door's not as soundproof as they thought. I hesitated, hand on the frame. I could see them through the glass. Melissa leaning on the counter, Ray checking something on his phone, and Bryant with a takeout menu in one hand, gesturing like he was holding court. They were going over the plan for the night, who was catching a ride with who made the reservation, what time they needed to leave. No one looked toward the door. No one noticed I was standing just a few steps away. They weren't whispering. That's the part that stuck with me. They weren't even trying to hide it, because why would they? I wasn't part of it. I wasn't in the chat, the group, the plans, none of it. I turned before anyone saw me and walked slowly back to my desk. My feet felt heavy. My mouth tasted like coffee grounds. I sat down and stared at the blinking cursor on a report I'd already reviewed 3 times. The glow from the break room lights spilled down the hallway behind me. It felt like standing outside your own house and watching someone else's party through the window. This wasn't the first time I'd been left out of something. I'd told myself it was because I wasn't a happy hour guy, that maybe I gave off the wrong energy, too quiet, too focused, too something. But this was different. This wasn't just forgetting to loop me in. This was deliberate. I kept working, kept my head down, but a question dug into me like a splinter. Was I really that easy to ignore? The laughter got louder as they packed up to leave. Melissa joked about ordering one less appetizer now, and someone, maybe Bryant, shushed her like she'd gone too far. I heard Ray laugh anyway. Then the door swung shut, and the hallway went quiet. My inbox pinged, an automated system update. No congratulations, no reminder about the dinner, just cold lines of code like always. I went back to my report. I adjusted the margins, rechecked the numbers, made sure the formatting was flawless. Not because anyone would notice, but because that's who I am, even if no one else bothers to see it. One by one, the screens around me went dark, like little stars winking out. Keyboards stopped clacking. The soft hum of chatter thinned until it was just a murmur behind a closing elevator door. Ray was the last one to leave from our side of the floor. He gave a vague wave without making eye contact, too busy checking his phone to notice, or pretend to notice, me sitting there. I waited until the elevator dinged and the doors slid shut before I let out the breath I didn't know I was holding. The office was never completely silent. The air vents made a low, steady whine, and the printer in the corner wheezed every few minutes like it remembered it had one more page to spit out. But now that the people were gone, the building felt different, hollow, like it had exhaled. I stayed in my seat. My back ached from leaning over the desk all day, and my dinner, if you could call it that, sat forgotten in a paper bag next to my monitor. I hadn't touched it. I told myself I'd eat once I finished the final revision of the system summary, but I kept finding things to fix. Truth was, I wasn't hungry. I just didn't want to go home yet, not with this feeling sitting in my chest like a cinder block. The cleaning crew wouldn't show up for another hour. The motion-activated lights above the sales wing flickered off, leaving only my corner lit up. I looked around at the neat rows of empty chairs, pushed in with the kind of casual finality people reserve for Fridays and long weekends. It was Tuesday. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling, letting the silence wrap around me. I wondered what the restaurant looked like, whether someone had taken the seat that should have been mine, whether they even noticed I wasn't there. Probably not. The report finished saving. I stared at the screen, my own reflection faint in the glass. Tired eyes, shirt wrinkled from sitting too long. I looked like someone who worked late because he wanted to. Someone dependable, reliable, invisible. Outside, the sky was a dim slate gray. The streetlights blinked on, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I saw Melissa's car still there, probably left overnight again. Someone would give her a ride home. Someone always did. I sat in that silence, the only human left in a building full of furniture and fluorescent light. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was working late. I felt like I'd been left behind. Maybe that was worse. The noodles were stiff by the time I opened the bag, clumped together in a cold mass, soaked in sauce that had thickened into glue. I found a plastic fork in my drawer, one of those flimsy white ones that snap if you try to stab anything more solid than rice. It was the only thing I hadn't run out of. I sat there chewing mechanically, the food barely warm and tasting like cardboard. I didn't even bother turning on music. No appetite, no noise, no distractions. Just me and the echo of conversations I hadn't been invited to. I kept thinking about the time I stayed until 11 p.m., fixing the vendor database Brian had accidentally corrupted. Or the time Melissa left early to make a family thing, and I presented her slides at the quarterly meeting without being asked. No one even thanked me, not once. They just assumed I'd pick up the slack. And I did. Every time. I did it because the work mattered. Or at least, I thought it did. Maybe that's the part that stings the most. Not just being left out, but realizing that all those hours, all that effort, didn't buy me a seat at the table. Not even a text. Not even a lie to make it easier. Like, hey, we had to limit it to department heads, or didn't realize you weren't on the thread. Just silence. Indifference served with a smile. My office felt smaller somehow. Claustrophobic. The kind of small that sneaks up on you slowly until one day you realize the walls have always been closing in. I leaned back in my chair, chewing one last bite, and stared up at the ceiling tiles. There were 12 of them across, 14 back. I'd counted them before, during overtime, during weekends. I thought about going home, but the idea of walking into my apartment, empty, quiet, dark, felt like more of the same. At least here, I could pretend I was needed. I could tell myself the glowing screen meant something. The fork snapped in half just as I scooped the last of the noodles. I stared at the broken piece in my hand for a long time before dropping it into the empty container. People think loneliness hits hardest when you're alone, but it doesn't. It hits hardest when you're surrounded by people who look right through you. I wiped my hands on a napkin, threw away the container, and opened the next file on my desktop. A system audit no one had asked for yet, but they would. And when they did, I'd already have it done, because that's what I do, even when no one notices. It wasn't just the dinner. That's what I kept telling myself as I sat there staring at the glow of my monitor, long after the building had gone quiet. It wasn't just this one night. It was every little moment that came before it, stacked up like invisible bricks I'd carried for years. I remembered my last birthday. It had landed on a Wednesday. I brought in donuts for the team, like I always did, just to keep the energy up during a brutal rollout week. No one said anything. No card, no happy birthday, just crumbs on napkins and an empty box left in the break room by noon. I watched Melissa post a group selfie that same day from someone else's cubicle. Balloons. A cake. The caption read, "Work fam knows how to celebrate right." I wasn't even tagged. There was the time I wrote the contingency proposal that saved us from the server crash. I'd stayed up until 3 a.m., rebuilding our offsite backups when the system failed. The next morning in the debrief, the manager smiled and thanked Bryant for stepping up. I waited for someone to correct him. No one did, not even Bryant. And I remembered the last town hall when promotions were announced. Ray had closed one deal. One. I'd onboarded 7 new accounts and stabilized a failing regional project, but Ray's deal had splash. Big client, big numbers, big mouth. He got the title bump. I got a nod from across the room and a "we see you" that never led anywhere. You start to wonder if maybe it's you. Maybe your quiet doesn't read as competent. Maybe your steady doesn't look like leadership. Maybe doing the job without needing applause means people stop clapping altogether. It's like showing up early every day to hold open a door no one thanks you for walking through. I stared at the framed photo on my desk. Me and my dad at my college graduation. He used to tell me that hard work always finds its way to the light, that people notice, even if they don't say anything. I believed him for a long time. Now I wasn't so sure. The dinner was just the latest reminder that showing up doesn't guarantee you'll be seen, that being dependable sometimes just makes you the person they feel safest forgetting. I rubbed my eyes and leaned back in my chair, listening to the building settle around me. A vent kicked on. Somewhere, a distant door creaked closed. The office had gone still, like it was holding its breath. And for a moment, so did I. The email came in with the same soft ping that usually meant spam or another system update. I almost ignored it, figured it was just a server notification or one of those end-of-day recap summaries no one actually reads. But the subject line caught my eye. Q2 Performance Metrics. Internal Summary. I clicked it, mostly out of habit. It was a plain email. No congratulations, no bright colors or banners. Just a table. Clean rows of data, one column after another. I scanned through it, half tired, until my name showed up. Top of the list. Client retention, 97.8%. Jacob Rowe. Resolution time, 1.3 hours average, Jacob Rowe. Project turnaround, 2.4 days, Jacob Rowe. There was no commentary, no breakdown, no human voice behind the numbers. Just me, floating quietly at the top. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to feel proud, but all I felt was this hollow sort of ache, like the numbers were speaking louder than I ever could, and still no one was listening. No one had forwarded it with a great job or dropped by to say anything. It was nearly 8 p.m., and I was still sitting alone in the dark, my name silently outperforming everyone else's. I remembered a few weeks ago when Bryant got called out in a meeting for rapid client response. That was during the week I was covering his inbox while he was out for 2 days. I'd handled the tickets, I'd resolved the issues. He got the applause. I could have forwarded the email, hit reply all and let the numbers speak for me, but I didn't. I just sat there, reading my name in those sterile lines of data, wondering if achievement only matters when someone's clapping for it. I got up and walked to the window. The city was lit up like it always is, headlights blinking on the freeway, office buildings glowing against the night sky. I wondered how many other windows had one person behind them, eating alone, working late, quietly excellent in a world that rewards noise. I went back to my desk and read the email again. The numbers didn't lie. I'd done the work. I'd done more than the work. But no one had noticed. Or worse, maybe they had, and left me out anyway. The cursor blinked at the bottom of the screen, waiting for input. I hovered my fingers over the keys, then slowly closed the laptop instead. For once, I didn't want to write the next report. I just wanted to feel seen. But tonight, the data would have to be enough. I was packing up when I heard the elevator ding again. That soft mechanical chime that normally meant the cleaning crew had arrived. But when I glanced up, it wasn't the janitor. It was Robert Langston, the CEO. He stepped out with that same measured gait he always had, like he was walking onto a stage. No suit jacket now, just a button-down rolled up at the sleeves. He looked out of place in the empty office, like a figure pulled out of a brochure and dropped into real life. He didn't see me at first. He walked past the reception area and headed straight toward the executive conference room. I sat back down at my desk, not wanting to look like I was loitering in my own office. A few moments later, he reappeared with a tablet tucked under one arm. That's when he saw my light still on. His eyes narrowed slightly. "You're still here?" His voice wasn't sharp, more surprised than anything. "Yeah," I said, clearing my throat. "Just finishing up some end-of-quarter reports." He took a few steps toward my desk. Not hurried, not forced, just curious. "This floor's been empty for hours," he said, glancing at the darkened hallway behind me. "You the last man standing?" "Seems like it," I said, trying to keep it light. "Quiet's good for productivity." He nodded but didn't walk away. "I've seen your name a few times lately," he said after a pause. "Metrics report, some back-end audits, client recovery logs, all with your initials at the bottom." I wasn't sure what to say. I hadn't expected him to notice. No one else had. "I try to stay on top of things," I said finally. He smiled, small and thoughtful. "You do more than that." He glanced toward the break room, now dark except for the glow of the vending machine. "They all went to the dinner?" I hesitated. "Yeah." "They leave you out?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement dressed like one. "I wasn't on the invite list," I said. My voice sounded too even, too practiced, like I'd been telling myself that all night and had finally nailed the delivery. Langston looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. "Well," he said, tapping the edge of the tablet against his hand, "sometimes the people keeping the lights on get left in the dark. Doesn't mean we're not watching." And with that, he turned and headed back toward the elevator, the soft echo of his shoes fading down the corridor. The elevator doors opened, then closed. The office was silent again, but for the first time all night, I didn't feel invisible. I thought that would be it. A brief exchange in a quiet office, the kind of polite acknowledgement that vanishes by morning. But then I heard the elevator doors reopen. I looked up, confused, and there he was again. Robert Langston, still holding his tablet, now walking back toward my desk like he had nowhere better to be. "You mind?" he asked, gesturing toward the extra chair across from mine. "No, of course," I said, straightening instinctively, trying to clear the half-empty water bottle and my crumpled takeout bag from the edge of the desk. He sat down slowly, not with the urgency of a man on a tight schedule, but with the quiet ease of someone used to making time when it matters. "Always like this floor," he said. "You can hear yourself think up here." I gave a small nod, unsure of what this was. He set his tablet on his lap and leaned back slightly. "You've been with us, what, 9, 10 years?" "9 and some change," I said. "You like the work?" I hesitated. No one ever asked that. Not in any way that felt like they actually wanted an answer. "Most days, yeah," I said honestly. "It's not flashy, but it matters. The systems stay up. Clients stay happy." Langston nodded thoughtfully. "That's the thing about infrastructure. It only gets attention when it fails." "Yeah," I said, half laughing. "Kind of like plumbing." He smiled. "Exactly like plumbing." There was a pause, not awkward, just space, like he was giving the silence time to breathe before asking something else. "You ever think about why no one invited you tonight?" The question landed harder than I expected. I looked down at my desk. "I figured they just forgot," I said. "Do you believe that?" I met his eyes. He didn't look accusatory, just curious, steady. No, I admitted. I think they don't really see me. Or maybe they do, but only when something breaks. Langston didn't respond right away. He just nodded slowly, absorbing it. That's a tough place to stand, he said quietly, holding up everything while trying not to be seen doing it. I didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever described it quite that way before. He stood up, smoothing the front of his shirt. I've run enough companies to know who gets praised and who gets relied on. They're rarely the same person. He picked up his tablet. But they should be. Then he looked at me again. Get some rest, Jacob. And if you're still in this chair the next time I'm back here late, I expect to see a raise request in your draft folder. I smiled just barely. As he walked away, the elevator swallowed him again. The quiet returned. But something about it felt different now. Like maybe it wasn't empty. Just waiting. He didn't leave right away. Langston paused near the elevator, then turned back. Actually, he said, you have 5 more minutes? I nodded, surprised. Yeah, sure. He walked back and leaned against the side of my cubicle wall, not bothering with the chair this time. It felt casual, but not careless. He scanned the spreadsheets open on my screen, then looked at the cluster of sticky notes lining the edge of my monitor. You're tracking deployment updates manually? He asked. I nodded. Its back-end sync is still buggy on version 4.2. I've been keeping a running log just to make sure we don't lose any rollback points. He raised an eyebrow. That's not in your job description. No, I said, but it needed doing. He looked at me a moment longer, then tapped the edge of my desk. Tell me something, Jacob. How many direct reports do you have? None officially, I said, but I've been mentoring the 2 new analysts, and I review most of Brian's work before it goes to ops. You're the one who got him onboarded, right? Yeah, HR was behind on the training modules, so I just walked him through the system myself. Langston didn't say anything, but he nodded slowly, lips pressed into a line. And when the vendor API crashed last quarter, he asked, I built a temporary workaround in Python. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep the client data flowing until dev pushed a fix. That workaround kept the quarterly review from collapsing, correct? I paused. Yeah. How long did that take you? 2 nights, maybe 30 hours total. He exhaled, not in frustration, just in recognition, like he was cataloging a list of things no one had bothered to mention to him. I motioned toward a small stack of folders beside my keyboard. I've also been auditing some old contracts. There were inconsistencies in the retention clauses, so I've been flagging them before renewals. Langston let out a low whistle. Jesus, Jacob, that's legal's job. I don't mind, I said almost defensively. I just notice things. And if I see a problem, I'd rather fix it than wait for someone else to maybe do it wrong. He stared at me, not in disbelief, more like he was seeing something that had been right in front of him the whole time. You know what the problem with people like you is? He said. I braced myself. You're too damn good at making it look easy. I didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever called it easy. They just called it expected. Langston glanced around the office one last time, then looked back at me. Keep your phone on tomorrow, he said. There's something I need to fix. And then he was gone. No speeches, no promises. Just that quiet sentence, hanging in the air like a light someone had finally decided to turn on. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious. Not exactly. Just wired. Like my brain didn't know what to do with the conversation it had just had, with the sentence still echoing in my head. Keep your phone on tomorrow. I kept replaying it. Not because it was dramatic, it wasn't, but because Langston didn't deal in unnecessary words. If he said he was going to fix something, it meant something was broken. The next morning, the office looked exactly the same. Fluorescent lights, stale coffee, people still laughing too loudly at Brian's jokes, Melissa still typing aggressively like the keyboard owed her money. No one looked at me differently, which I guess I expected. Whatever Langston meant, I figured it'd be subtle. Quiet. Around 10:07 a.m., a company-wide email hit everyone's inbox at once. I opened it with the same automatic detachment I opened all corporate blasts, but the first line stopped me cold. Some contributions aren't loud. They're just essential. And sometimes the people who carry the most weight do it in silence. Today, I want to acknowledge one of those people. My eyes skimmed down, barely breathing. Jacob Rowe has been with us for over 9 years. In that time, he's not only maintained the stability of our most critical systems, but he's also trained new hires, prevented project collapses, and solved client issues that never even reached your desks. If our infrastructure runs smoothly, it's because Jacob has been standing behind it. There was a list, specific, detailed, unmistakably informed. Things no one but I and apparently Langston would have remembered. The emergency patch, the vendor workaround, the contract audits. He laid it all out, line by line, no fluff. Jacob didn't ask to be recognized. He never has. But that's exactly why it's time he is. Culture is measured by who we notice. Starting today, let's do better. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a while after that. I didn't know what to type. Not a thank you, not a reply all, just something. But there was nothing that would have felt real enough. By the time I looked up, people had started turning toward my desk. Ray, Melissa, even Bryant. None of them said anything yet, just glances, hesitations, like they were seeing me for the first time and realizing I'd been there all along. The cursor blinked at the bottom of my screen, waiting. And this time, it didn't feel like it was the only thing that saw me. Bryant was the first to approach. He hovered by the edge of my cubicle like someone trying to peek into a room they weren't sure they were allowed to enter. "Hey," he said, voice lower than usual. That email. Pretty cool." I nodded, not sure if I was supposed to say thank you or, "Yeah, I know." I settled for a quiet, "Yeah." He shifted his weight awkwardly. "I didn't realize you were doing all that back-end stuff. I thought Ops was handling it." "They were supposed to," I said evenly. He winced, gave a small nod, and walked away. Next came Melissa. She didn't speak right away. She just leaned her arms on the divider between our desks like she had dozens of times before. Only this time, her voice was softer, careful. "Jacob, listen, I think some of us maybe took for granted everything you do." I turned slightly, met her eyes. They looked tired, or maybe exposed, like the mirror had finally tilted toward her side of the table. "I know we should have looped you in about the dinner," she continued. "That wasn't okay." I nodded again but said nothing. Because what was there to say? "You're right. It's fine." It wasn't fine, but I wasn't going to hold court now. I didn't need their apology to validate the work. Langston had already done that, and he'd done it in the one place they couldn't ignore, their inbox. By noon, 5 more people had dropped by with some variation of "I didn't know. You deserve that email. Sorry we missed it." The irony was hard to miss. They hadn't noticed my work for years, but now that someone important did, their attention showed up like a fire drill. But it didn't make me bitter. If anything, it made things clearer. People notice what they're told to notice, what the culture trains them to value. And until yesterday, I wasn't on that list. I was the fallback guy, the fixer, the one you thank silently by not giving more work. Now I wasn't invisible anymore. Not because I shouted, but because someone with power finally pointed a light in my direction. That afternoon, an HR notification hit my inbox. Internal title change pending. A modest raise. The kind of bump that didn't scream promotion but whispered, "We see you now." And for once, the whisper was enough. I minimized my windows, leaned back in my chair, and looked around. Same office, same desks, same blinking lights. But something in the air had shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, but permanent. I went to lunch alone, like I usually did. No one asked me to join them, and I didn't expect them to. Cultural tides don't turn in a day. Just because people see you differently doesn't mean they know what to do with that yet. Recognition is one thing, relationship is another. I walked to the small diner 2 blocks down, the one with the flickering sign, and the waitress who always called me Han without ever learning my name. I liked it there. It didn't ask anything of me. I sat at my usual table in the back, ordered the same turkey club and black coffee, and stared out the window while the world moved like it always had. Cars rolling by, phones ringing and passing briefcases, No headlines about quiet analysts being seen for once, and still something felt different. When I got back, there was a folded note sitting on my keyboard. It wasn't typed. It wasn't part of some team building campaign. Just a torn piece of legal pad paper, folded once. My name written in sharp, blocky pen. Inside, "You've been carrying more than your share. I see it now. I'm sorry. Ray." I stared at it for a moment longer than I needed to. Not because it fixed anything. It didn't. But it was the first thing Ray had ever written to me that didn't involve passing along a mistake he wanted cleaned up. By mid-afternoon, things had mostly gone back to normal. Meetings were happening, keyboards were clacking, people were making bad coffee and pretending to enjoy it. But I noticed how some of them glanced toward my desk before walking into the conference room. How Melissa held the door a beat longer when I trailed behind her. How no one interrupted when I finally spoke up during a project huddle. Maybe nothing changes overnight. Maybe they'll forget again, next week or next month. Maybe the noise of the office will drown out the silence that made them notice me in the first place. But even if it does, I won't forget what happened. Because for one day, someone cracked the ceiling open. Someone with weight. And the light didn't just pour in, it stuck. I sat at my desk near the end of the day, watching the sun stretch through the blinds. The report I'd been dreading finishing didn't feel so heavy anymore. My inbox was quiet, my screen calm, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. I'd already done enough, and finally someone knew it. I stayed a little later than usual, but not because I had to. No one was waiting on a file, no fire to put out, no last-minute cleanup from someone else's oversight. Just me at my desk finishing what I'd started that morning. Not out of pressure, but out of pride. I clicked send on the system audit, leaned back, and let the quiet settle in. It was different now. Not the heavy, isolating kind of quiet I'd known for years, the kind that made your skin itch with invisibility, but a stillness I could breathe inside. Like the noise had finally receded enough for me to hear myself again. The office emptied slowly, just like always. Coats slung over shoulders, elevator doors closing, voices fading. But I didn't feel left behind this time. I just felt done. Not in the giving up kind of way, in the complete kind. On my way out, I passed the break room. The lights were off, tables wiped clean, but someone had left a post-it on the fridge, scrawled in red ink. Next time, everyone means everyone. No name, just that. It could have been Langston. It could have been someone else. Maybe Melissa, maybe Brian, maybe someone I didn't even know had been watching all this time. It didn't matter. The message was clear. Things were shifting. Outside, the air was cool. The streets shimmered with the early evening glow of taillights and sun-gold reflections off windows. I didn't rush to my car. I walked slower than usual. Lighter. Not because the world had changed, but because, for once, I wasn't dragging the weight of being unseen behind me. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and just sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel. The inbox could wait. The next project could wait. I had done what I always did, held the line, fixed the broken, stood in the gap. But now, finally, someone had stood beside me. And that makes all the difference. Sometimes the loudest recognition isn't applause. It's when the silence breaks and someone says, "We see you," and means it. The next morning, I didn't dread walking in. That realization hit me somewhere between locking my car and crossing the lobby, the quiet absence of that usual knot in my chest. No second guessing whether I should have spoken up more. Smiled harder, tried to be part of the team. No bitterness tugging at my heels. Just breathe. Just movement. The security guard nodded at me like always. I nodded back. But this time, he added, "Hey, congrats. That was a nice write-up yesterday." I blinked. "Thanks," I said, and kept walking. The elevator ride was short, but my thoughts stretched long. That email had gone places, places I hadn't expected. When I reached my desk, there was a box sitting on my chair. Plain cardboard, no markings. For a second, I thought it might be a joke. But when I opened it, I found a leather-bound notebook, a better set of pens than anything our supply closet carried, and a printed card. For the guy who keeps the system running when no one's looking, consider this your official toolkit upgrade, Langston. It wasn't flashy, no plaque, no stage, but it was more personal than anything I'd received in nearly a decade. Melissa came by mid-morning. No pretense this time, no small talk. She just stood at my desk, quiet for a beat. "You're good at what you do, Jacob," she said. "Really good. I should have said that a long time ago." I nodded. "Thanks." She didn't push for more, just gave a tight smile and walked away. That was enough. The rest of the day moved with its usual rhythm. Calls, code, files, fixes. But it all felt clearer. People still asked for help, but they didn't assume. They said thank you. They looked me in the eye. A few even stayed after meetings to ask questions that had nothing to do with tickets or timelines, just human things. I didn't need a standing ovation. I didn't want one. What I wanted, what I had, finally, was something quieter but deeper, to matter. Not just because I picked up the pieces, but because they finally saw whose hands had been holding them together. I closed up right at 5 for the first time in weeks. No guilt, no dragging feet, just a clean exit. On the way out, I glanced back once. Same desk, same screens, same seat, but not the same man. The invite came 2 days later. Not from HR, not in a mass email. It came in a simple Slack message from Langston himself. "Some of us are grabbing dinner Friday night. Not a company event, just people who show up when it matters. Would be good to see you there." There was no pressure in it, no glossy RSVP button, just an open door. I stared at it for a few minutes, unsure how to respond. I wasn't used to being asked, especially not directly, especially not by someone who actually meant it. After a while, I typed back, "Thanks, I'll be there." Friday night came faster than I expected. I changed into something decent, nothing fancy, just enough to feel like I wasn't still at my desk. As I pulled into the restaurant parking lot, I recognized a few cars. Langston's, obviously, but also Miss Patel from accounting, James from compliance, Carla, who works in logistics and runs circles around most project managers. None of them had been at the original dinner. Inside, the restaurant was warm and quiet. Low lighting and soft conversation. A long table was already forming, half filled with people I'd seen for years but never really spoken to. Not because we didn't want to, but because we'd always been too busy doing the work no one noticed. Langston was already seated, sleeves rolled up, sipping a coffee instead of wine. He looked up when I walked in and gave a single nod. No spotlight, no announcement. Just that same grounded, steady respect he'd shown me in the office. Carla pulled out a chair beside her and waved me over. "Glad you came," she said. And I could tell she meant it. There were no toasts, no speeches, just real conversation. Stories about late-night fixes, broken systems that got patched just in time, tiny triumphs that never made it into the town hall slides. Every person at that table had kept something running behind the scenes. And for the first time, we were all in the same room. At one point, someone mentioned the other dinner, the one I hadn't been invited to. Langston just smiled faintly and said, "That one had noise. This one has weight." I didn't say much. I didn't need to. Just being there felt like enough. And when the check came, Langston covered it without a word. Just signed his name, stood up, and clapped a hand on my shoulder on the way out. "You earned this night a long time ago," he said quietly. "We're just catching up." As I walked to my car, I realized it wasn't really about the dinner. It was about the table, about who gets invited to sit at it. And finally, for once, I wasn't watching through the window. I was already inside. I paused in the parking lot, one hand on the door handle, and looked back through the restaurant's windows. They were still in there, laughing, leaning in close, passing plates like they'd known each other longer than a week of Slack threads and status meetings. And maybe in a way, we had. We'd all lived in the same silence. We just hadn't realized how many of us were in it. It hit me then. This wasn't just a dinner, it was a course correction. Not some grand gesture or forced team-building thing. Just people who did the work, finally getting to share space with others who understood what it cost. I drove home without music, letting the quiet settle in again. But this time, It didn't ache. It didn't press in like a weight. It just sat there, clean and light, like air that had finally cleared. When I got home, I didn't open my laptop. I didn't check the dashboards or skim reports or mentally prep for Monday. I sat on the couch, kicked off my shoes, and let the calm stretch out around me like something earned. Because it had been. Because I had spent years thinking the only reward for showing up was being asked to show up again. I thought being overlooked was the price of being reliable. That the moment you needed recognition was the moment you proved you didn't deserve it. But now I knew better. Recognition doesn't always come in the moment. It doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes it arrives in a soft-spoken message, a folded note, a chair pulled out at a table that used to be close to you. And when it does, it's not validation, it's confirmation that you weren't crazy, that your effort wasn't invisible, that the version of yourself who stayed late, who picked up the slack, who gave a damn when no one else did, that version was right to keep going, not for praise, but because it mattered. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and smiled. Just a little. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting to be seen. I was, and that changed everything.